going to introduce our guest speaker today. Her name is Catharine Eckersley, and Catharine is an occupational therapist and the owner and director of Valley to Peak OT Consulting, a private OT practice in Calgary, Alberta. She has with a master's in occupational therapy from the University of British Columbia in 2016, a master's of arts in physical education and recreation from the University of Alberta in 2012, and a Bachelor of Arts in Kinesiology from Western. Catharine brings an extensive educational background to her practice. Along with that, Catharine is proud to be on the board of directors for ARC, that stands for Accessibility Renovations for Kids. That's a Calgary-based charity which provides free home accessibility renovations to children with mobility limitations. Excellent services, including flexible weekend, evening, and virtual appointments for Albertans, resulted in Valley to Peak being awarded, and this is going to take me a minute, the 2023 Consumer Choice Award for Southern Alberta, the 2022 Community Votes Calgary Platinum Award, and being rated as a top occupational therapy business, Best in Calgary 2022. With no referral necessary, Catharine looks forward to connecting with you directly to discuss your occupational goals. So there we go. And I'm going to pass it over to Catharine.
Perfect. Thanks, Linda. And thank you to Linda and Louise, and obviously the Calgary Neuropathy Association for having me today. As you know, today we're going to be talking about occupational therapy, neuropathy, and you, how to increase your function. We're going to cover a little bit of many different areas instead of going into a lot of depth, because each of the areas that I touch on today can be entire presentations onto themselves. And Linda and Louise and I have discussed the possibility of maybe doing future presentations in some of these areas later. So today is really just a brief overview of the different areas that occupational therapy can be involved and can assist you in your journey with neuropathy. Okay, so we already did. I don't have to tell you about me anymore. That's all been covered. So I have my BA, my MA, and my MOT. Despite the accent, yes, I am British Canadian. I did complete all of my higher education here in Canada, and I am based in Calgary. And I would just like to again thank the CNA for inviting me to present. I'm not necessarily a neuropathy expert, but I do consider myself a functional expert in that as an occupational therapist, if you tell me the functional difficulty, then regardless of the diagnosis and with the diagnosis in mind, I can help you to navigate and solve and sort of mediate whatever that may be. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail in a minute. But just two quick things. Linda's already done a fantastic job of explaining, but any questions, please save them to the end because I might cover them. And also it just throws me off a little bit, to be completely honest. I have no conflict of interest to declare. I don't sell any particular products or equipment and have no compensation from any of the vendors or equipment that I'm going to be showing you in the presentation. It's more just, I love pictures, I love videos, I love showing people what I've seen, what works, what I've trialed. So there are tiny little snippets of me demonstrating various equipment or pictures of equipment that I do recommend or use, but I'm not supporting any specific like brands or names, just officially out there. And final words that this is an inclusive and safe space for everyone. Please be respectful of others when you're using the chat box. For those of you who are in Canada, I do want to say happy Bell Let's Talk Day. It is actually Mental Health Awareness Day today. So just something to keep in mind as we move through the slides. We've got about an hour today. I might be slightly under that. I do like to leave lots of time for chats. I love chatting, so feel free to throw in all the questions and we'll get to them at the end. All right, so without further ado, we'll jump into it. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to very briefly talk about neuropathy. I'm not wasting too much time on this. Most of you are experts or have lived experience I very briefly just sort of skim over the top of it for due diligence. And the real depth and like the meat and potatoes, as it were, of this presentation is on occupational therapy, and then what that can occupational therapists can do in terms of neuropathy. So what are OTs? When are we involved? In Canada, how to access public versus private. I know we have people joining us from the States and apparently from the UK, which is great. Hi, everyone. I am not familiar with outside of Canada, unfortunately, so I can try my best to answer any questions. You might need to look into your own national occupational therapy associations if you're outside of Canada. And then for OT and neuropathy, Linda and Louise, we had a pretty good discussion about sort of what general themes people might be interested in or that have come up before. So like I said, we're doing no deep dives today, but a little bit of everything. So we'll touch briefly on mobility, falls prevention, adaptive equipment. Got lots of photos to show you, some really cool stuff. A little bit on what we can do with energy and pain management, sensory re-education, very briefly touch on neuroplasticity, but it sounds like you're going to get that covered in much more detail at your next webinar series next month. And then what would home assessment involves? What would return to work or staying at work look like? Modifications, ergonomics, and then driving. So we look at a little bit of everything. So neuropathy, again, keeping this simple, because most of you are experts. Of course, there's many types of neuropathy, right? There's chemotherapy induced. We've got genetic types, diabetic, B12 deficiencies, Guillain-Barré syndrome, many, many different types. Typically, the sensory changes involved can include pain, and it's typically in your limbs because your nervous system is, you may have had this explained to you before, sorry if it's a bit redundant, your nervous system is split into two parts. You have your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. So your central nervous system, that's your brain or spinal cord. Peripheral nerves are everything outside of it. So the function of the peripheral nerves is to send the messages from your brain and your spinal cord to the rest of your body, like your arms, your hands, your legs, your feet, and into the joints. So when these nerves that aren't protected by the skull, like your brain is, and it's not protected by these by your vertebral spinal column, like the spinal cord is, they're vulnerable to damage. So when this happens, one or more peripheral neuropathies or polyneuropathies can develop. So typically the symptoms involve changes in your limbs. So tingling, burning, sometimes it's referred to as like the stocking and glove patterns of sensation. You can have changes in your balance, changes in just overall sensation in your feet, bump into things you don't realize are there. High risk for falls, lots of different symptoms. There's no specific clear treatment. There's a variety of medications, lotions, therapies, that can exercise, of course, vitamins, supplements, and pain medications that can help with managing it, especially OT, physio, chiro, acupuncture, etc. But the good news is that functional changes can be managed, and that's what we're going to be touching on today. So again, just a very brief, more simplistic version of what the symptoms of peripheral neuropathy can present as, depending on the type of peripheral nerve affected. And we're not going too much into the science here, but essentially your sensory nerves, your motor nerves, and your autonomic nerves, depending which of these are damaged, results in certain symptoms. So sensory nerves, it can be pain from light touch. So everything's incredibly sensitive. It's tingling, it's burning. The sensory nerves can impact your balance, put you at more risk for falls. Motor nerve damage, generally that's more muscle cramping, twitching. And then autonomic nerve damage can be heat intolerance, not an issue we have right now in minus whatever it is in Calgary, but heat intolerance, excess sweating, impotence, orthostatic hypotension, just to name a few. So again, not going into too much detail around neuropathy. Most of you are experts. So let's dive into OT. What is it? What can we do? How can we help? So occupational therapists, for those who haven't worked with any of us before. We're medically trained rehab specialists. We're very often confused with physiotherapists, if that helps give you sort of like a point of reference, but we're not physiotherapists. So we have a bachelor's or a master's degree in occupational therapy, depending on how old, I was going to say how old we are, depending on how old we are and when we completed our education. I completed my education a little bit later in life, went off and did a few things after school first. So I have a master's, but some of my colleagues at the same age, just to age me, have their bachelor's, for example. But regardless, in Canada, you just need one or the other to practice and to be registered. We consider ourselves experts in function. So if you hear the word function, 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 that's what we do. We are doers. We help you do. And I know that sounds very vague, so we'll go into a bit more detail. We are very research, theory, and evidence driven. Everything we do is based on either anecdotal evidence or literature, studies that come out. We're heavily involved in research, most of us. We consider ourselves very creative and collaborative problem solvers, and 100% believe in client-centered approach. So you as the client, for those of you who do have neuropathy, as opposed to healthcare providers who are watching, we very much put you at the front and in the front and center, as it were. Whatever your goals are, we help you to work on those. We bring in on our education, we provide strategies and education, recommendations, but at the end of the day, the individual with the lived experience of neuropathy, or whomever our client is, they're in control. It's all about what can we do to help them. They have the choice, the autonomy, etc., to make those decisions. So in terms of function, what we do is we work with anyone of any age, which is why I really like this little slide here. Stole this from the Nova Scotia Society of OT, so I've got to give them credit. Who do we work with? Absolutely everybody. Honestly, we work with individuals from the start of life to end of life. We provide end of life care. That normally surprises people. There are OTs that work in the hospital, like in the neonatal units with premature babies. We can work with pretty much absolutely anyone in any setting. If there's any functional difficulty with some sort of medical or psychosocial background that can be compensated or remediated or modified, that's when we come in, which is why sometimes people get confused as to what we do, because we do a little bit of everything. As opposed to physiotherapists, you say physiotherapist and people typically think, ah, yes, it's that, you know, that strong woman or that buff guy that is in the clinic and he moves my arms and legs, he helps me get strong, or she does hand therapy on me, etc. You have a pretty clear idea of what physio is. And we do work in partnership with physiotherapists, which is why there's often quite a bit of confusion too. So just to make it a little bit easier to understand, I stole this fantastic video from my alma mater, from UBC. This is before my time, again, to date myself. We, as occupational therapists, we have OT challenges to promote OT awareness. And this is one of the videos that one of the classes prior to mine completed. And it just explains a little bit more about what occupational therapy is in general before we jump into what we can do for neuropathy. So I'm just going to hit play here. It's only a couple minutes long. It's a cute little video. There we go.
We all have life goals, things we need and want to do. Sometimes things get in the way of our goals. Life events can make our goals seem impossible. I love gardening, but it's difficult because I have arthritis.
I want to drive my car, but I couldn't after my stroke. I need to find a job, but it's been challenging since being diagnosed with schizophrenia.
I want to make new friends, but it's hard because I have autism. I need to get dressed in the morning. But I just had a hip replacement and can't bend forward.
I have difficulty managing my responsibilities because of my anxiety disorder.
I haven't been able to ride my bicycle since I had a brain injury.
I need to do my grocery shopping, but it's difficult to remember when I have dementia.
It's tough to care for my baby because of my carpal tunnel syndrome.
I need to walk my dog, but I have multiple sclerosis.
I want to learn the guitar, but my right arm is amputated. I had a spinal cord injury, but I want to live on my own. My occupational therapist helped me to achieve this goal.
Occupational therapists help people to find the tools and strategies they need to overcome barriers such as illness and disability and reach their goals.
Now I live on my own. I'm learning the guitar.
I can walk my dog.
I can care for my baby again.
I am able to do my grocery shopping on my own.
I can ride my new special bike.
I am working on managing my responsibilities.
Now I can dress myself.
I'm making new friends.
I'm working with my OT to find the right job for me. My OT helped me to drive again.
I have a garden now. Because of occupational therapy, I can do it.
So just a short and sweet. I really like that video. I use that a lot when I'm explaining occupational therapy to some of my new clients. So again, just giving credit. That's not my video. That's from the UBC Master of Occupational Therapy class of 2013. But I think it sort of just gives a good overview of the vast area that occupational therapy covers. Okay. So in the community, for example, this is from the Society of Alberta Occupational Therapists. It's just a diagram that explains and shows that we can be involved in reducing the length of hospital stays. We can promote active living in the community. We work with individuals in the school, in the home, in work, in a vast number of areas. So in occupational therapy, when we say occupation, this typically throws people off because they think of occupation as work, as a job. And confusingly, yes, we do work with individuals on work and return to work and employment. But when we say occupation, we mean a meaningful daily activity. So anything that you do every day is an occupation. Getting dressed is an occupation. Brushing your teeth is an occupation. Driving is an occupation. Washing the dishes is an occupation. Me presenting today is an occupation. Anything that you do, essentially think of occupation as task. Anything that's an important task for you. So when we look at occupational therapy, we're looking at what are you having difficulties with functionally with these daily occupations, these daily tasks, and what can we do to compensate or remediate? So we can be involved in wheelchair prescription, we look at mobility, medical equipment, we work in cognition, people aren't often aware of that. I do a lot of work in cognition, mental health. We can help refer to respite support groups, driving screens, navigate healthcare systems, the insurance systems, all of those confusing systems we have. We can help you navigate all of that and be involved in case management. So for those of you who aren't in Calgary and not able to access Valley to Peak services if you require them, I just want to point out, again, this is for Canada specific, sorry anyone from outside of here. I just want to point out this amazing website, again, not mine. This is through our Canadian Association of Occupational Therapists, and it lists nearly all of the OTs in Canada. And if you actually go onto the website, you can type in the city. I've just pulled one up randomly. So I've just put in Ontario. Do you want an in-person or a virtual assessment? Do you know their name? If not, no worries, it'll list everyone. And then you can focus in on the demographic. So are you looking for hand therapy? Are you looking for pediatrics? Are you looking for chronic pain management? Is it for you? Is it for an adult, a child, a senior, etc.? And so you can filter all of this down and it brings up this vast list of occupational therapists, public and private, and where you can access them. Typically, it's private OTs that are listed on the site, but a lot of public OTs are now listing themselves on the site just to increase awareness of services that are available through the public system. So I strongly encourage anyone, if you're not Calgary based or Alberta based, if you're in Canada, of course, that's a fantastic website. If anything today, write down that website or just Google Find OT Canada or Find OT CAOT, and it'll bring up this site. If it looks like that, you can filter everything. It's a fantastic resource. So definitely recommend that. So jumping into more of the bulk of the actual presentation for today. So OT and neuropathy. So today, like I mentioned, and as the video showed, we can talk about many different areas of your day-to-day activities. So Linda, Louise, and I kind of discussed these as being potentially the key areas of interest. So we'll touch base on these briefly. So mobility, equipment, energy and pain management, sensory re-education, hand therapy, home assessments, aging in place, work and ergonomics, driving. It's quite a bit. If you get overwhelmed or if you have questions, feel free to just throw them in the chat box. Again, today is more bringing awareness to the different areas the OT might be able to help you with your lived experience of neuropathy or with your loved one's lived experience of neuropathy. There are a couple of takeaways, like here's something you can think about and consider, but it's more of an awareness piece today, if that makes sense. So mobility and falls. Okay, so obviously with neuropathy, if you've got changes in sensation in your feet, whether it's diabetic related or otherwise, changes in proprioception, you're not quite sure where your feet are, you bump into things, you think you've put your foot on the step, you haven't, high risk of falls. So much research to support this. So what can you actually do about it? Lots of things. The number one thing I normally talk to people about, surprisingly, is footwear. It's one of the leading causes of falls, not having too many things around your home, but just having the wrong support on your feet. So if you're looking at the picture, for example, this individual, yes, they're tripping on a rug, not great. But also, I picked this picture because you can see they're wearing comfy slippers. Great, they're protecting their feet sort of with the comfy slippers, but their toes aren't protected, so that's not great if they're diabetic or have any changes in sensation in their toes and put them at risk for injuries. They won't notice necessarily if they're bumping into things or hypersensitivity if they do bump into things. But you can almost see in the picture the heel isn't holding. Sorry, the shoe's not holding the heel. It's not a fully encapsulating shoe. So I normally tell people, like, avoid flip-flops, avoid these loose, comfy little slippers. You want something that actually stays on your foot. You want something with good grip. I have lots of clients who wear like proper prescription shoes within their home for pain management, for support, for mobility. Especially if you've had any sort of like gait assessments, so walking assessments, standing assessments with a physiotherapist. You may have specialized shoes. You may have AFOs, so like ankle foot orthoses, those special braces for your feet to help support if you have any foot drop or concerns around that, or knee braces. So I normally, the first thing I do is I look at shoes. What are you actually wearing in the home? Show me what, if I wasn't here, what would you actually be doing and wearing? Which is why I like home assessments, because when someone comes in the clinic and they go, oh, I just wear these, and they've, you know, they brought their winter boot, they're wearing their winter boots, or they've come in their runners, their running shoes. It's nice to see, what do they actually use? What's by the front door? What have they got at home? Other things, some of these are fairly obvious, but we'll try and throw out a couple of new ones you might not have thought about. But decluttering and reorganizing the home. I don't mean throwing everything out or shoving all the furniture to the side and having it just be around the edges of the room. Obviously, aesthetics play a huge part in our home and our comfort, but just being mindful of moving furniture to increase space, maybe for mobility aids, or even just shortening distances from point A to B. So I have people that have to walk all the way around a coffee table and another piece of furniture just to get to the kitchen. So that increases your risk of falls, because instead of going straight, and if you have decreased balance, now you're having to circumvent or circumnavigate, you're gonna have to go around a piece of equipment or a piece of furniture that's in the way. So just things to think about, shortening distances and trying to make clear, straight paths, especially when it comes to visibility and lighting. This is essential. So lighting is huge. It doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to bring in electricians. You can go to, again, if you're Canada-based, going to say Shoppers, that's not right. You can go to a Canadian Tire or equivalent. Again, I'm not promoting one particular place. You can get these fantastic lights. They're various sizes. They're typically about this size, and they can be censored, and you can install them or stick them depending if you rent or own, you can just stick them in various places around the home. I've got them in cupboards. They're great. Just open the cupboard, the little light pops on. Fantastic. Didn't pay thousands for rewiring the house and adding all these pot lights, though that's an option too. So adding lighting in key areas of the home. So things like also being aware of low-level hazards, not just rugs. Everyone thinks of rugs, get rid of the rugs. But also carpet thickness and rug thickness. It's not necessarily removing everything off the floor. It's for you being more mindful of what your foot's making contact with. Being aware of steps inside and outside, being aware of furniture. Is there something you're consistently bumping your leg into that you're not aware of? Or do you always have bruises on one side of your calf and not on the other? Why may that be? Is it the side of the bed you're always bumping into? Can you, not baby proof, but essentially just like safety proof parts of your home to make it so that you're less likely to have injuries? Being aware of doorway thresholds, even just going from, oh, you can't see, even just going from my living room into the bathroom, there's a tiny little lip. And if you have any vision concerns or changes in balance or in sensation in your feet, just that tiny little lip, you know, you have the little wooden cover or the metal strip that goes between the thresholds of the doorways, that can throw you off. So just being aware of those and removing those or replacing them with something, or adding little doorway threshold, not full ramps because that sounds extreme, but you can have little razors, tiny little razors that go over so that you can work on those instead. Or you can consider zero threshold doorways, zero threshold bathrooms, looking at grab bars, comfort height toilets. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Another thing I always recommend to individuals, if for risk of falls, neuropathy or not, review your medications and diet with your physician. So by diet, I don't mean like weight loss diet. I mean anything that you're consuming, whether it's extra supplements or vitamins, where you've researched like this is the best, whatever it might be, mineral, vitamin, this is the new in thing to help with pain management, etc. Always run that past your physician because there might be contraindications that might be interfering with your meds. And what we call polypharmacy, so being on lots of medication, generally a red flag is if someone's taking more than 12 medications. That's a red flag. And certain types of medications, of course, put you at risk for falls. So having those regularly reviewed and checking the dosage and the impact of them, that's huge. We always recommend regular vision checks too. That ties into like lighting, make things easier to see, less likely to fall. Moving every day. So when I tell people, how do I prevent falls? Exercise. First thing they do, most of them, is just roll their eyes like, oh, well, that's obvious. But I don't mean necessarily like go to the gym exercise. I mean more daily physical activity, and I call it more active living. So just being more mobile within your home, doing seated yoga on the couch, doing some stretches before you get out of bed, working on things simple as sitting to standing. So going from sitting to standing up and doing that, a couple of reps of that, an hour every couple of hours throughout the day or 2 or 3 times a day. That anything to really help strengthen any of the big and small muscle groups that are being impacted by your neuropathy, can help reduce the risk of falls, right? If you're sitting around all day because it hurts to move, understandable, of course. The less you use it, the less mobile you become, typically. So we try to encourage just even little extra exercises. Park a little bit further away than you normally do from the store, like just little things, if manageable, of course. Doesn't have to be go for a hike, go for a run. It can be walk to the mailbox. It can be just adding in a bit more movement, more opportunities to practice, more opportunities for your brain to take in the sensory information, practice proprioception, and strengthen those muscles involved in stabilizing your core and your balance. I also generally recommend home assessments of an OT. If you've done all of these areas and you're still having issues, there may be something you haven't thought of, or there might be some new equipment that might help. So home assessments of OTs, I recommend those, not to plug our services, but this is what we do. So if you need help, let us know. And another area can be considering mobility aid assessment, whether it's assessing a mobility aid you're currently using. So if you're already using like a cane or a quad cane or a walker, etc., just having someone look at it. Has it been regularly maintained? Is it set up for you appropriately? Is it the right height? Is it too old? Is there something loose? Have you developed past that point of that and you need to change to a different one? Or is it the other way around? Sometimes I'm telling people like, you're actually more mobile and more balanced than I think you realize. You don't need this level of equipment. We can step back a bit. So it doesn't always have to be progressive, if that makes sense. Another area that was recommended to discuss is apparently people have lots of questions on how to get up from a fall. So I found this fantastic video. I was trying to find a couple different ways. I know it says seniors, but it's for anyone. The 2 best ways to get up from a fall, if you have anything near you or if you don't have anything near you. Because most people tell you if you fall, grab onto a couch, grab onto a chair, pull yourself up. But what if you don't have those things around you and you're out and about? Then I've just got this great little video here.
How to get up off the ground after a fall. Falls can be very scary. Oftentimes, falls result in injury. It could be a cut, it could be bruising, it could be a broken bone, it could be even much more serious injuries. Oftentimes, falls result in a trip to the hospital. In people over the age of 65, having a fall is the #1 reason that they enter into a hospital. It's also the #1 reason that people move into nursing homes. Falls can be very serious. If you had a fall and there's anyone nearby to help you, the best thing to do is to call for help and get another person to help you get up. Getting up on your own is very difficult and could easily result in more injury. Probably the best advice if you had a fall is to call 911. Get emergency help as soon as possible and wait for that help before you try to get back up again. But often, people have falls where there's no one around, where they're not having their cell phone or a call button nearby, and they just simply can't get help and they can't call for help. In this video, I'm going to show you the 2 best ways to get up after a fall. The first method is called the chair method. To do the chair method, you need something like a chair nearby. It can be a chair, a stool, an ottoman, any type of furniture or anything that you can sit on top of. It could even be a firm box, anything that will support your weight. What you want to do after you had a fall, the first step is to get onto your side. Once you roll onto your side, what you're going to try to do is to get onto your hands and knees. So this is in the hands and knees position with your hands down and your knees in contact with the ground. Because the next step is to crawl to that chair. You want to crawl on your hands and knees until you get close to the chair. And then you want to bring your hands onto the seat of the chair. The next step is to use the seat of the chair to bring one of your legs flat on the ground. So now you're in a kneeling, half kneeling position with one foot on the ground. Now the next step is to get off the ground. To do that, you want to push down on the chair and push on the foot that's on the ground and bring your other leg and your bottom up off the ground. Once you're in this position with your hands still on the chair, you want to pivot and then sit down on the chair. It's very important not to try to stand all the way up after you've had a fall. Many people injure themselves further by trying to do that. The safest thing is to sit on the chair for a few minutes until you feel comfortable and able to stand up and then get help. Now, for many people watching this video, that first method is going to seem impossible because they're not able to kneel. You might have had a knee replacement or knee surgery. They might have severe arthritic pain. They might say they just aren't able to kneel for any number of reasons. So there is another method. It is definitely a little bit more difficult. It's called the scoot method. I've even seen it called the MacGyver method. Now, to do this, you're going to have to find something around you that you can build into a little staircase. Now, in my example, I'm using these balance mat cushions, but you could easily use couch cushions, pillows, boxes. You can put as many things together as you can. But what you're trying to do is build a little staircase with 2, 3, or 4 steps. What you're going to do is once you've built that, so you're on your side and you may have to scoot a little bit on your side. So you don't have to go onto your knees to do this. Once you've built a little staircase, what you want to do is try to sit on that lowest step. And then with both hands on the next highest step, you want to pull yourself backwards onto that step, then pull yourself backwards onto the next step. If you can build your staircase so it aims at a ottoman or a chair, that would be the ideal, because then you could be up onto the chair and then rest a little bit until you're strong enough to stand up. But if you can, just getting up off the ground, even as little as 10 or 15 inches off the ground, can allow you to recover enough and get up more easily. Not everyone who falls is going to be able to do either of these methods. If you find that you can do the first method, that's by far the easiest and the safest. But a lot of people, because of knee problems or pain, are just not able to be on their knees. So for them, I highly recommend the scoot method. And if you're outside and you fall, while that can be scary, oftentimes there's things nearby that you can use the scoot method and try to do the same thing. It could be scooting yourself over to a curb and then using the curb to get up off the ground. It's kind of hard to predict what's going to be nearby you. But what you should be thinking after you've had the fall and you can't call anyone for help is to try to find something nearby that you can pull underneath you to sit higher. Study after study has shown that the longer you spend on the ground, the worse it can be after a fall. So anything you can do to bring yourself off the ground could potentially save you. Even if all you can find is a blanket or a sheet or a pillow, anything that gets you up off the ground is going to be beneficial, and it's going to make it easier for you. I honestly hope that these methods are something you never have to do. I hate to think of anyone falling and not having someone nearby to help them. But if you find yourself in that situation, I hope this can help you. If you like this video and want to see more videos.
Okay, so just a little bit there, and I can always put the links for these as well into the chat at the end. This is a very short one. It's just a minute, and it's just a quick for anyone who's interested in equipment, or if you're not able to, or if you live with someone who is able to help you at home, there's some fantastic equipment. Again, not supporting Razor specifically. This is the Razor 2. This is an emergency lifting chair, and it lifts someone from the floor. And essentially, if I turn the cheesy music off, you pull it out of its case, bring it over to the individual. You take the pieces out, they're lying down on the ground. Hopefully you've gotten them on they're on their back, they're not face down. You put one piece under their legs here, you seatbelt them in, you stick the 2 pieces on the side, so one underneath them, one on the other side. They make it easy with color coding. And then essentially, without having to do any physical lifting or trying to heave your partner or loved one off the floor, this is fantastic. You can do it by yourself, especially if your partner or your loved one has difficulties and they're not able to lift you. Stick the pieces underneath them, push the button, and it raises you up. So it's a fantastic piece of equipment. It's not low cost by any means, but if you are having frequent falls or concerns around falls, you're not able to help, then for example, the Razor chair or something similar to it could be beneficial for you. Oops. Okay, mobility aids. So we're going to touch briefly on these. So if you're using one now or planning ahead, whether you're using a quad cane, so these, you could use a forearm crutch that reduces some of the hand pressure if you have any issues with your hands. 2 or 4-wheeled walkers, really depends on what your current mobility is like, and whether or not you're able to control your speed. Are you bumping into things? Also the size and logistics of where you're using the walker, inside, outside. Mobility scooters, again, are you using them inside or outside of a home or facility? And then looking at things like wheelchairs. And then these are whole presentations by themselves. Again, we're barely touching on a little bit of everything. But if you are interested or having difficulties with mobility, these are areas you can be assessed for, whether it's for now or down the road. these are areas that can be looked at. And things to consider include like vehicle modifications. You're able to transport a wheelchair or a scooter. Where are you going to store the device? How are you going to maintain it? Funding. Do you have access to insurance, extended health benefits? If you're in Alberta, we have the Alberta Aids to Daily Living. So it's the public occupational therapist can prescribe equipment like wheelchairs and other mobility aids if required. So if you use canes, I always recommend to people in our winter climate to make things safer. Again, not promoting specifically the ISO grip, but adding little basically like a flippable ice pick attachment to your cane can make it safer for outside use. There are various travel buggies, so travel scooters that fold up, and then various different types of walkers to consider as well. If down the road you need any sort of mobility powered wheelchairs, there are options for those of you who don't want to jump to the right picture, which is me very pregnant, in a amazingly fantastic customizable but expensive, of course, high-end, very high technology, powered wheelchair where you can fully stand up, you can tilt back, you can recline. I don't have any of the front safety pieces on that stop me from folding off because I'm heavily pregnant and we're not moving in the picture. But there is normally like a chest piece and a waist piece and a knee piece to help if you need that down the road. There's also powered attachments you can add to manual wheelchairs because the cost from going from a manual to a powered wheelchair can be pretty financially restricting. So there's things like this is a manual wheelchair here on the left, and we've added on a powered attachment, so a handle bike. A hand bike attachment, or for example down here in the middle, so a powered wheelchair, and we've added a smart ball to the back of it, so a powered attachment which is controlled through the clicker here. So there's lots of options to look at in the future if appropriate. Adaptive equipment. So these are things that you might find more helpful for day-to-day use. I call these our life hacks. They can be weighted, padded, voice activated. There's a lot of one-handed and hands-free equipment that is fantastic and makes a huge difference when it comes to things like cooking, cleaning, etc., self-care. And those are some of the ones I really wanted to focus on today. You don't have to buy any of this equipment. There's a lot of things you can do to modify various tools and equipment you already have at home. So just going through this quickly, we've still got quite a bit of content. I want to make sure we cover a couple of key areas. But there's adaptive devices. If you're having trouble with your range of motion or being able to grip and hold various items, then we have bendable. There's all sorts of equipment here. So we've got long-handled shoe horns to reduce risk of falls and bending down to the floor. If you're having difficulty using your fingertips and doing finicky buttons, you have trouble with jewelry or anything like that, there's equipment that can help with that too. So you can see here in this picture of the buttoned shirt, there's a button hook device. So if you can't hold and manipulate those tiny little finicky buttons, most people go, I just won't wear a button shirt. But if you want to, or if you have to, for whatever reason, then you can use a button hook device. So you're no longer having to hold the tiny little button, you're holding the thicker padded device, and it very simply, you grab the button, pull it through the hole, done. There's equipment that can be involved in one-handed nail clipping, so you don't have to be holding and manipulating nail clippers in your fingers. So that's what this one is down here, this back device here. I wouldn't recommend a long-handled nail clipper for your toes if you're diabetic, because I'd rather that you can see what you're doing or someone does it for you, see a podiatrist, etc., just for safety around with diabetes and feet. But if that's not a concern, then long-handled toenail clippers. There's hands-free devices, like you can get a hands-free, stick it on your wall or put it on your counter, hairdryer, for example. Anything to reduce holding, twisting, manipulating, opening, reaching, bending. There's lots of equipment that can help. Again, just very briefly touching on this, lots of bathroom equipment to reduce the risk of falls. You want you can reduce the risk of falls by either going to the high end, which is the bathroom renovation. You just walk in, obviously significantly more costly than putting in some other equipment. But things like transfer benches, you sit on one end, scoot your bum over bit by bit, lift your legs over the top slowly, and then you sit and have your shower. Or if you're able to and you want to, lower yourself into the bath. If there's space, but that way you're not stepping into the tub, because that's where the risk for falls is when you step into. So if you're sitting on a shower chair, that's great. You're not going to lose your balance or be dizzy, or you might be dizzy, but you won't lose your balance in the shower if you're sitting. But it's generally the stepping in and out of the tub that puts you at more risk than standing in it. Things like raised toilet seats, bathtub lifters, perch stools. So if you want to sit and do various items, oral hygiene, etc. at the sink, decrease your risk for falls. Cooking, amazing one-handed cooking devices out there. There's just push a button, as seen on TV, cheesy gimmicks, but they work. I prescribe them all the time for clients. They can pop off jars, so no more fussing around and squeezing those special adaptive devices where you've got they adjust to the size of you're not having to twist anything. You just put it on, the little feet adapt to the size of the jar, push the button, it spins, pops off, easy. We've got one-handed cooking devices and one-handed cutting boards. So this cutting board here, for example, there's many different types. You put your tomato, pepper, whatever, on the little spikes or in the holder. Then you're not needing to use both hands. You're not having to use the eye-hand coordination, reduces your risks for cutting your fingers or having difficulties of holding, manipulating, and stabilizing food when you're cooking if you have any decreased sensation in your hands. Then there's all sorts of equipment that, cuts bread for you or various items for you, bread cutters, meat cutters, again, reducing your risk for injuries. And then there's devices that help with lifting and holding and stabilizing pots and pans while you're cooking, or it pours the kettle for you. Cleaning, lots of equipment that can help make things easier, whether it's long-handled devices like a long-handled dustpan, so you're not leaning down at the floor and putting yourself at risk for falls, whether it's using like a robot vacuum so you don't have to vacuum, using lighter vacuums, using utility carts to move items around the home so you're not tripping, or if you trip, you're not dropping everything that you're holding, long-handled devices, so lots of items for cleaning. Lots of items for around the home, like increasing the levers if you're having difficulty of turning keys and finicking around that. The other option is switching out from, the twisting keys to like a number lock, for example, makes it a little bit easier. If you're having pain and fatigue with standing near the sink or stove when you're doing the dishes or cooking, adding in like an anti-fatigue mat can be fantastic to help reduce some of that spinal loading and help with some of the sensations in your legs. I do recommend wearing shoes though, so ignore the bare feet. Then there's all kinds of equipment to help with mobility, getting in and out of in and out of bed. If you're having difficulty of grip strength, not able to grip and manipulate because of any pain or difficulties in your hands, there's lots you can do with cutlery. These are just a couple examples. There's padded equipment, bendy equipment, weighted, unweighted. You can do quite a bit, as shown in the bottom right-hand picture here. You can use like a universal cuff on anything. So whether it's a crayon, a toothbrush, a razor, whatever it might be. That way you're changing the grip. You're not necessarily having to pinch or twist or manipulating. It's got a universal cuff. So lots of adaptations that can be done to help with items around the home. These ones here are gardening supports. I had clients with neuropathy who are having trouble with gardening, and they've got elbow supports. So it helps so they're not having to grip and hold too much and having that pressure through their hands and their wrists. You can do makeshift things like, for example, someone made a cart. It's not quite as fancy, but it does the job. It's functional. That's all that matters. You've got two different types of card holder here. You can buy a card holder, looks nice. You can make a card holder. Just go to the dollar store, buy a pool noodle, have someone slice it down the middle, stick your cards in, right? Then there's other things like book holders and voice automated control systems. Lots you can do to help with any of that. Very briefly, just touching on sex. I know that for some people, this is often neglected as an occupation. It is meaningful to a lot of us. There is no offense meant to this whatsoever. I'm just providing education. So for anyone who is interested, there is a fantastic manual. It's called The Pleasure Able. It's specifically designed by like OTs and specialists and people with lived experiences with disabilities. It's updated regularly. I think it was updated last summer. I know quite a few of the people that contribute to it. It's amazing. So it specifically lists different types of devices that can help if you're having difficulties with sexual health. So for example, at the bottom here, when you go into the manual, it actually lists the different items that work with a specific concern. So there is a heavy focus on spinal cord injury. So if you're having difficulty of lower limb movement, if you don't have any core balance, then there's those different sections too. But I just copy pasted and brought up like the limited hand function. These are different things you can do if you have limited hand function. These items may help. And just an excerpt here, one of the less potentially offensive graphic items. So you can have a universal cuff. It just gives you a picture of what it typically looks like, or a massager, that's what it typically looks like. Has a little description, gives you the price range, which is nice, tells you how to keep it clean, healthy, safety, good, and then special considerations. So like, you know, pros and cons of various things. So I won't talk too much more about that, but if that's something you're interested in, there's lots of fantastic things that can be done. Because unfortunately, as we experience pain and as we experience chronic disability, sex unfortunately tends to be one of those things that gets sort of put on the back burner, or you're having difficulties with it and you're like, oh, well, I don't need it now, for example. Or so I just like to make sure it is something that is addressed. That's something an occupational therapist can work with you on if you are interested. Again, very briefly, OTs can provide support with energy and pain management. We provide education, strategies, home practice. We help people with their mental and emotional health around it. We help with pacing, prioritizing. We help people set realistic expectations and limits around their pain. Provide education on pain education, neuroplasticity principles, and all the various things that you can do to better manage energy and pain. Boom bust cycle, we're just going to briefly skip over this. I'm just being mindful of time here. So we can discuss the boom bust cycle with you and how to better manage your energy if you're one of those people that has good days, bad days, good days, bad days. That's something that can be addressed through OT, as well as the energy conservation principles. We can help you with sensory education, so utilizing different textures, temperatures, pressures. We normally combine it with psychology, neuroplasticity. You can involve wax baths, etc. Any OT with training can provide sensory re-education. It doesn't have to be a hand therapist. Hand therapy, again, doesn't have to be a hand therapist. We look at different functional activities. We can be involved in splinting, strengthening muscles, stretching range of motion, and provide you with home exercises. Home assessments, what's typically involved is an OT would come out to your home or do it virtually. We go through your goals. What's your health? What are your goals? Physical, cognitive function. What are you concerned about? What's your accessibility, your mobility? Do you need support and connection to resources? Do you need any treatment? We collaborate with those involved if you want them to be involved, and then we provide follow-up. We can support individuals with aging in place. So many different areas in aging in place. If that's an interest or concern for you, we can be involved in that too. Ergonomics, for anyone who's in OT, this is just me at a work site. We can help people either work from home or do at-work assessments. We can modify the environment or tasks. We can help you with equipment. We can liaise with the HR and insurance. We can recommend all sorts of equipment. These are just typical ones here, but I've recommended all kinds of really interesting and makeshift modified equipment to help individuals stay at work. Driving, again, just very quickly showing you this. Driving can be like an entire day presentation. If you're having difficulty with grip and you're worried about driving, there's all sorts of things you can do. There's different modifications. You have to look into, depending on where you were living, the legal specifications for your vehicle, the safety, and obviously if you're in Alberta driver fitness and monitoring, make sure the government knows what you're doing and you have permission, insurance knows, etc. So just throwing it out there. Involve all the appropriate parties. But you can use palm grips or you can use Brody knobs, or you can look at using single pin posts. If you have neuropathy in your feet, I have individuals, it's not just with spinal cord injury users or amputees, people can drive using hand controls for the brakes, as shown here in this picture. This client actually is showing I took this one off of YouTube because I didn't have any pictures of my current clients, but they're using a spinner knob here on the left hand, so they don't have to grip the whole steering wheel. They're using sort of the little snuff box area of your here, or between your thumb and your finger here, and they're using their right hand is operating the foot controls. So I know we're running short on time, just a super quick plug. So as I mentioned, my name's Catharine. I'm with Valley to Peak. This might be a little overwhelming. All the many different areas that we provide support in. So we do driving assessments, ergonomics, hand assessments. I go out to facilities, wheelchair assessments. We travel like a 200-300 kilometer radius of Calgary. So there's pictures of me here out in Banff. I want to say I'm near Drumheller over here. We go into the hospitals as needed. We work with everyone of every race, gender, background, etc. We provide post-COVID treatment, cognitive treatment, neurology treatment, etc. For those of you who aren't, we'll skip the testimonials. My contact information is here. For those of you who aren't Calgary-based or aren't Alberta-based, don't forget there is that find an OT. So the slide, I can skip back to it if you want, or I'll put the link in the message in a minute. So you can pull up an OT in your region if you're Canada-based, and if you're not in the Calgary area and I'm unable to support you, then if required, then look up Find an OT on the CAOT website and find someone appropriate that's certified and registered in your area that can help you. So I know that was really quick, and the last bit I kind of skimmed right through it because, like I said, I was trying to just briefly touch on all the different areas. These are even just some of them. It's not everything. And it looks like there's been at least 46 or 47 messages in the chat. So I don't know, Linda, how you want to go about that, but I think we're going to open up to questions, or maybe Linda will just read them.
Well, they're not all questions, fortunately. So
okay, good. Okay, so in that case, why don't we go through questions?
Names of simple, non-fancy equipment in Canada to wash my tile floor without getting down on my knees.
Oh, how do you wash your floor without getting on your hands and knees? Yeah. There are amazing, I mean, there's heavy, chunky, like steam cleaners, but you can get these really great, it's not a Dyson, it's basically like a stick mop with like a washable, removable head, and it's got a little bit of, oh God, what is it? Sorry, I'm trying to think of the word for it. It's essentially a stick steam mop. So you're
thinking of it like a Swiffer?
Yeah, it's like a Swiffer, but it's actually, it's powered and it has steam, so it's more effective. Because Swiffers, you have to really kind of like, you still kind of have to dig and put a lot of force into it, right? The steam's great because it lifts all that grime up for you. And I have individuals that also use, oh God, what's it called? It's like a water vacuum. I think that's what we're calling them these days. Where it sucks everything up really powerfully and then it filters all the dirt through a vacuum. So then when you're emptying it, it's cleaner too. So there's some fast, if you go on Amazon, not that I promote Amazon, but if you go on any website where you buy easy deliverable to your home items, if you don't want to go shopping, there's powered and motorized stick steam mops. That's it, steam mops. Okay. Yeah, good question though, because yeah, scrubbing is hard. If you can't grip or manipulate, or you can't get down on your hands and knees, or you don't have the ability to, or don't want someone to come in and do it for you, how do you maintain your independence? Yeah, there's equipment.
Do occupational therapists do scrambler therapy?
What, sorry?
Scrambler therapy. It involves the use of electronic stimulation on the skin to help overwhelming pain information.
Oh, I'm not familiar with it, but that doesn't mean necessarily that we don't. If it's using a modality on the skin, though, it's not subdermal. It sounds like it would most likely be a specialized area. I know that in Canada, like if you want to do anything involving subdermal, you need some debridement, etc. You need special certification and licensing. I know in the States, occupational therapists, I don't know if they necessarily do scrambler, but they require extra certification in using different modalities similar to physiotherapy, where you're using TENS machines, etc. Like anything involving potential risk of harm from, say, a current, whether it's heat or cold or any sort of energy, typically requires extra training. It's not something I'm familiar with, but certainly something I'm going to take note of and have a look into. But it's not something that we provide. OTs might do it.
It might be physiotherapists is
Okay.
more
I'm
likely.
not familiar. No, sorry. Not sure.
Okay.
Good question. No, I can look into it.
Someone asks, Ron asks, can you help significantly with chronic fatigue syndromes, exhaustion, and muscles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We do that quite a bit. Me personally, slash occupational therapist, yes, we do a lot of education around fatigue, whether, and there's been a greater emphasis, fortunately or unfortunately, due to post-COVID, long COVID syndrome. That's one of the typical symptoms. We work with a lot of individuals with fatigue. So I know I barely mentioned, but we go through the boom bust cycle. We talk about pacing. We look at the different ways you can do preventative fatigue management. There's different techniques using like different Likert scales, so rating your fatigue from 0 to 10, managing and tracking throughout the day. There's something called like the spoon system, where you only have so much energy throughout the day, and what are you going to use your spoons on? So points systems. It's more about creating an awareness of where your energy is being spent. Is that the best place for you? Is it effective? How much recovery do you need? Can we stabilize your energy across time so you're not having a good day, overdoing it, having a bad day, needing to recover for a couple of days, then trying to catch up and having a good day and overdoing it again? So it's all about managing energy more appropriately. It may not necessarily eliminate fatigue. Our goals, unfortunately, or typically, not unfortunately, typically our goals aren't to eliminate pain or eliminate fatigue. If we can, that's fantastic. Yay. I always hope that we can. It's more about managing it so that it's not as high and it's not having as negative an impact on your life as it currently is, if that makes sense.
I think so. This is actually probably the same answer, but Mary was asking about what alternatives are there from OT to possibly replace meds, which are not always effective and not without side effects.
It completely depends. There's lots of what we call cognitive behavioral therapies. There's lots of different strategies we can provide you around creating awareness, developing a greater sense of your body, using psychology principles, using research-driven principles around different strategies to manage. It depends on what you're specifically trying to address. I know that's vague, but about doing an assessment, I can't be more specific than that. But I know lots of people that generally OT doesn't replace meds, depending what the meds are, but some clients do reduce medication if they're using certain strategies appropriately. So they may reduce some of their pain medication if they can better manage their pain with psychology and OT. They may reduce their frequency of pain. So we can help reduce the frequency, for example, of migraines. For example, in combination with other therapies. We're not a there's no easy fix, unfortunately, and I hate that. But
Ron's asking if you have a questionnaire on your website regarding diseases and syndromes that one can fill out in advance.
Oh, like an intake form? No. No, right now I like to make it as easy as possible. I know sometimes if I go on and I want to find someone to help me with something, I don't want to fill out long forms. I just want to phone them or send them a quick note. So no, we don't have an intake form where you can list any various conditions, etc. It's just a basic contact form that sends me whatever your question is. Just comes straight to my email.
How many days a week and time do you exercise? Do the exercise? Should you alternate, take days or pause, or do it every other day, sort of idea?
It depends what exercise you're doing, and that I can't speak to because I haven't done an assessment, so it's not safe for me to prescribe a frequency for you, unfortunately. It depends on what you're doing. I'd need to do an assessment. Sorry, that I can't speak to. That'd be like asking me what should I do with your meds. I don't know. I don't have enough information. Generally, more exercise the better, but not necessarily. Talk to your healthcare team, talk to your physician, review your meds. Yeah.
Okay, you were talking about renovations and stuff for people to be able to be more functional within their house.
Yes.
So are there some grants or charities that do that kind of stuff for people?
Yeah, absolutely. There's not as many as there should be. I'm involved in one of the charities that works with children, but for adults in Alberta, sorry, I'm just going to speak to Alberta specifically because that's where I'm based. That's what I know. In Alberta, we have the RAMP program. That's the Renovations and Modification Program. It's for accessibility renovations in your home. It is for lower income individuals. There are specific financial thresholds that you have to, or maximums you have to be under.
Yeah.
But you can be eligible for up to $7,500 per benefit year to a max of 15,000 total within 10 years for adding a ramp, adding grab bars, doing a bathroom reno, etc. in Alberta. So if you Google, for those who are Albertans, if you Google ramp, R-A-M-P, which confusingly makes you think of a ramp, but actually it stands for Renovation Accessibility Modification Program. So Google ramp, Alberta government funding, and then it will pull everything up. You can fill out the whole application yourself for free, but you do need an OT or a physio just to sign one form that essentially confirms that you're eligible based on your mobility. So they just need a healthcare professional to come out to the home and say, yeah, they need a stair lift. They don't have one, and I've seen them walk. They need a stair lift. We just sign it. So if that's something you're interested in, we provide those services. And then across Canada, each province has their own funding. So I would look into your provincial funding resources.
Yeah, yeah.
But
okay,
yeah, there are some.
Proprioception. I gave a brief explanation about what it was, but Anita was asking what proprioception is.
What, sorry?
Proprioception?
Oh, proprioception is your brain's ability to recognize like where your body is in space. So for example, if I close my eyes and I stick my hand out, proprioception is me knowing without looking at my hand over here that my hand is over here. So it's your awareness of where your body is in space. So sometimes sometimes if neuropathy, like, you know, logically, like my feet are there, they're always there, assuming you're not an amputee, sorry. Assuming your feet are there, you look like you can see them, you know they're there. But if you're walking, you don't have a good sense of like where your foot is in space to what you're walking on. So you might stumble, you might misjudge a step, for example. More than just like, you know, you're busy, you're rushed, you run up the stairs, you catch your foot. But it's having that awareness of your body's presence in space.
I know for myself, under certain conditions, my feet sort of seem to disappear on me.
Yeah. So they can you can still feel them. Possibly they could be tingling or burning, but it's just you can't quite judge that depth for walking specifically, or they just don't feel. It's a really abstract concept. It's like, how do you explain pain? They just don't quite feel like they are where they're meant to be, is the best way to describe that.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a bit of a discussion about crampons and then little devices for putting on necklaces. I had a question about, like, I like the cooking devices, but I wonder about, like, you had a meat slicer there, for example, and I think, man, if I had serious problems, I'm not sure I'd want to clean that.
Oh, I see. Yeah, normally
way.
a lot of the equipment that I recommend is I think I just pulled up some generic pictures for that. There are ones that can be just thrown in the dishwasher to make life easier if you have a dishwasher. So those are things that I consider when I'm doing like a more in-depth assessment with someone and I'm recommending specific equipment. I'm asking them like, who does the dishes? Where do you put stuff? Where do you store it in your home? We very briefly just were like, here's some equipment. No, I look at how do you handle it? Can you lift it? Is it too heavy? Where would you store it? How often would you use it? Should it be on the counter? Can you reach down low? Who's going to wash it? Where do you, all of that's taken into consideration when I'm not just going, oh, your hands don't work. Here's a jar opener. There's a lot more to it. I was just throwing out a couple of examples, but there are types that can be detached, or like a quick release button and the blade just pops off and you stick it in the dishwasher.
For sure.
Okay, I have
we had questions about barefoot versus shoes. Like a lot of people, I always wear shoes. A lot of people prefer to go barefoot because they can't stand having anything on their feet. So why is barefoot bad? And is it bad?
Okay, so it's not. So barefoot isn't necessarily bad. It's just your foot is more, and it's up to you, personal preference and what you're comfortable with, of course. I'm not able to assess everybody. If you find that you have a greater awareness of where your feet are in space, so you have a better idea of your proprioception of your feet when they're barefoot, and you can get that extra sensory information coming up through your feet from the ground, if that you find is useful versus wearing shoes, or shoes are uncomfortable, then that's what I would recommend, because that would reduce your risk of falls. If I generally recommend people wear shoes in the home if they're diabetic for start, it's more about protecting the feet, because you don't want to catch your foot, stumble your foot, cut your foot, and not have that awareness that there's an injury on your foot and have a wound or a bruise, or catch a toenail, or step on something that throws off your balance. So it's more about safety, protecting like the skin integrity. So it's kind of an each to their own, whatever works best for you. I have some clients who prefer being barefoot because they're like, I like to practice like not claws, but they like to grab the ground with their claws, with their toes. They like to do that sort of scrunchy motion. They like that sensory input. Others have to wear prescription shoes with like an ankle foot orthosis, or if they have oh God, what is it? Marie-Charcot tooth disease, whatever, with their feet, then they have to wear prescription shoes just for safety and for foot alignment and splinting, etc. So it depends on your specific situation. It's not that bare feet are bad. It's just pros and cons of both. Which one puts you specifically more at risk based on your mobility? Just something to consider.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Roxanne asks about hand tremors. That's all the question was. So I guess you have stuff to help with hand tremors.
Yes. I was like, hand tremor, yes. So with neuropathy, yes, you can have hand tremors. Are there things we can do about hand tremors? Yes. There's equipment that can be provided to help compensate for it. You can do strengthening exercises, range of motion exercises. You can work with a hand therapist or an OT with any sort of hand therapy training. It depends what the difficulty is. Like, are you having hand tremors when you're cooking and you need help with looking at the equipment? So like I said, we're function based. So whatever activity that you're doing that you're having difficulties with because of the tremor, we look at that one and we kind of isolate it, if that makes sense. So if you're having tremors on the computer, then I look at ergonomics computer equipment for you, or exercises to help with typing or using a mouse. If you're having tremors when you're cooking or sewing or getting dressed, then I look at those specific occupations. So we kind of don't just address tremor overall. You do that with hand therapy and physiotherapy, right? Just work on general strengthening, but it kind of helps. Well, it really helps to know what you're planning on using your hands for that's giving you the most grief, so that we can target that specifically.
Right.
Does that make sense?
There was an interesting comment that I'm going to bring up here because I also have the same question.
Sure.
I don't know if you run into this with patients of yours who take meds that make bones brittle, but they have to take them because they're prescribing them long term, such as pantoprazole.
Yeah.
So can you comment on the conversations you have with patients? Or how do they manage that if they have to take these meds?
So there's when it comes to medication, I more do a quick review of, are there any red flags from your meds that put you at risk for falls or tremors, etc., or may impact your cognition, etc. And then I recommend like a strong review with the physician and with the pharmacist who prescribes the medication, because we are not medication experts. It's completely outside of our scope of practice. I just like to have an awareness of what people are taking and how it impacts their body. But if people are having difficulties in general with overall bone weakness and density concerns, then I would be recommending talking to your physician, but also seeing whether or not physiotherapy would be appropriate for bone strengthening overall. Or if there's day-to-day activities and exercises you can do within the home, more of those active living exercises, like practicing going from sitting to standing, that would help strengthen the bones, depending which ones are impacted. So I'd need a bit more information, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, that makes sense.
And I hate saying it depends, but it really depends. Like, all of these questions can be entire presentations in themselves. So, but I appreciate the questions, and I'll keep trying my best to answer them.
I think we're actually pretty close to the end here.
Okay, yeah.
We're getting lots of thank yous and
and
great presentations.
Just a general question from several people. Sure. Would it be feasible to send us links to the video? And of course, there's a request to see the presentation on YouTube. So the recorded presentation, but would you be able to feel comfortable making your slides available?
I can send the links if that's what people are interested in. We
Okay.
can certainly do, I can send the links. And I'm more than happy to have the recording. It is being recorded.
Okay,
Notified
sure.
when you came in. More than happy to have the recording on YouTube so you can look back on it, or if you're like, oh, there was a certain slide I wanted to look at, then you can flip back
Okay,
that
sure.
way.
Thank you.
But just for protection of confidentiality and protection of, well, not confidentiality, sorry, just for what's the word?
Right.
Protecting the slides, essentially. I don't feel
No,
comfortable sharing those right now, but I'm more than
that's
happy to
okay.
post the presentation and to answer
problem.
any questions, of course. Yeah, just because there's a lot of work and time that goes into putting these together, I'd hate for it to be misused in any way or
No
misunderstood.
problem.
Yeah.
No, we will post it to
Mhm.
YouTube, okay?
That sounds
So,
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
okay,
course.
great. Okay.
So yeah, what usually happens, I've started Zoom, which is the platform that we're on, sends the link to the presentation, like to the video within about an hour or two.
Okay.
And so by tomorrow, I usually send out that link to everybody who registered, because again, like I said, it would only about half the people showed up.
Mhm.
So we'll do that. It's not going to actually get to YouTube for quite a while because I'm backed up. I've
That's
got like
fine.
4 others before
Yep.
I get to this one. So yeah, but
Fantastic.
at least the folks who registered will be able to see it for a while.
Perfect. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you again to everyone for joining today. Thank you for the wonderful questions. I hope I was able to answer them appropriately, or at least point you in the right direction. If you have any others, please feel free to reach out to me through any of the different methods listed there. Or if you're outside of Alberta, then look at the Canadian Occupational Therapy listing. If you're outside of Canada, then not much I can help you with, but you can always reach out if you want, and I can try to point you in the right direction for your country specific Occupational Therapy Association. And I would just like to say thank you again for joining, and thank you to Linda, Louise, and the Calgary Neuropathy Association for inviting me to host. I love educating and sharing just a little bit of my information and experience, and hopefully you're able to take something away from this today. So thank you for joining.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Catherine.